All right, bleeding brakes. Let's do the bleeding brakes thing. Okay, so bleeding brakes. There's a couple of ways of doing it. And because this is the internet, whichever way I choose is going to be the wrong way. So better off you just pick a way that you like and do that. And don't yell at me about how the things I'm doing are all wrong. And that way everyone's not unhappy. When you are bleeding your brakes and you're flushing the old fluid out, which I recommend is done every 12 to 18 months on adventure bikes in Australia. The idea behind it is that brake fluid's actually designed to absorb. Why won't that go back in? I just took it out of there. That thread's trashed. Not surprised. This bike's got 50,000 Ks on it and it hasn't been gently used. It's been pretty well thrashed. When you're riding adventure bikes the way they should be, they're going to get wet. They are going to be dunked in rivers. They are going to be driven in the rain. All the other things you can do that are bad for them. And brake fluid's designed to absorb moisture. So every time you go through a river, no matter how careful you are, some of that moisture gets caught up in the reservoir and you end up with water in your brake fluid. So bleed the old fluid out. You can, if you don't have a brake bleeder, you can pour it out. You can do whatever you need to do. These suction bleeders are good. Problem is, this is where the argument comes in. The problem is they're designed to work on cars. They run a fairly high pressure and they create quite a vacuum. So if you're using these pressure bleeders, you can actually create air voids in your brake fluid, which will give you spongy brakes. And that's what we're actually here to fix today. So let's try not to do that. Fresh fluid in the reservoir. I've already pre-cracked the nipple. I've got a hose. Use a length plastic hose, doesn't matter. Run a hose into a bottle. Pre-pressure the system a little bit. Crack the brake nipple. See what comes out. See what color it is. Once you've got a little bit of, there's some air. Once you've got a little bit of fluid in the hose, you can leave the nipple open while you slowly pump the brake. Keep the reservoir topped up. Otherwise, all you're doing is introducing more air into the system, completely defeating the purpose of doing this in the first place. Now, for non-ABS systems, it is on average, remember average, not guaranteed, on average 3 to 4 reservoirs of fluid to completely flush the system from start to finish. So on average you'll use 3. I usually go a little bit more, make sure that I get all the old fluid out, make sure that it's all nice and clean. You cannot trust the color of brake fluid to tell you whether it is fresh or not. Different companies use different colors. They'll look different. All you can rely on is a brake fluid tester to tell you whether or not your brake fluid is contaminated. Don't just rely on color. The stuff I'm using here is Motul. It's just a .4, not running anything special on this one. But .4 from the Motul looks a lot darker and looks as if it's already second-hand compared to, for example, the .4 that Bellray do. And the Bellray stuff's really clear, looks really nice. Only problem is it still looks really clear and really nice when it's at 4%. So color's not the right indicator. Feels a bit better. Thing to remember with brake fluid, it will destroy your paint. It's part of the chemical properties of it is that it will eat paint. So if you've spilled anything anywhere, the best way to clean it up is with water. Don't use brake cleaner. Brake cleaner doesn't actually break down brake fluid. That's a lot of brakes in one sentence, but anyway, you know what I mean. Water does. Water completely neutralizes it. Means that your paint is safe. Means everything's okay. And that is bleeding a rear non-ABS brake. Pad's about 50% warm. So, this final top up of the reservoir, roughly where it should be. And then clean the rubbers. So all that dirty old brake fluid that you had in there that you're bleeding out to get rid of, you immediately put that rubber back in. Put that rubber back in there. And all you've done is reintroduce contaminant back into your clean, fresh brake fluid. And that seems kind of pointless. So, clean the rubber, clean the little seating cap, and then put them back in again. That's it. That's your rear brake done. ABS systems are a little different, obviously, because they're ABS. With ABS systems, you've got your ABS pump. And the ABS pump needs to be purged every single time you bleed a brake. Now, there's a couple of different ways of bleeding or purging an ABS pump. You can plug it into something like Texa, which is that diagnostic system that I've got, and it will run the pump for a set cycle, purge all the air out of it, make sure it's all running properly. The other way to do it is to go for a test ride, and while you're on your test ride, activate both the front and rear ABS pumps and make sure that there's no air in the system. So there's a story here and going around from a few years ago from Yamaha. There was a police bike, an FJR, that was serviced in a country town, and part of that service was to bleed the front and rear brake systems and make sure they were all good. They bled the front and rear brake and everything was all good, and the cop rode the bike around for a week and everything was fine. And then one day he was riding down a steep hill and the car in front of him realized there was a cop behind and hit the brakes, And the cop hit his brakes and activated ABS front and rear. And when he went to apply the brakes next, while still going down the steep hill, he had no brakes. So Yamaha actually released a technical bulletin, and that technical bulletin was that every single bike that had ABS had to have the pump purged using the Yamaha diagnostic tool. You do the same thing with Texas. That's it. That's a rear brake. Last thing to check when you're doing it is just check your fluid level, make sure it's all good. That's it. Go away.